Hello, I'll present Understanding and Applying the Evidence Base for Strategic School Actions for the school action of creating a new school. Texas strategic school actions are bold strategies that school districts can use in order to meet the unique needs of students in their communities. The 4 school actions include create a new school, redesign a school, restart a struggling school, or reassigning students to a higher performing school. In this video, I will actually discuss relevant research related to creating a new school. One article shared results of how creating small schools of choice had a positive relationship with increased graduation rates. Similar to research related to other school actions, research related to creating a new school shows that many school improvement efforts are done in conjunction with other school improvement efforts, and it can be hard to pinpoint which exact effort is driving the results. More research is needed about the impacts of creating new schools on student outcomes. School districts may decide to create a new school in order to fill a gap in the educational needs of their community. For example, one school district in Texas realized that too many students were arriving in kindergarten without the appropriate skills, so they created a new school, which was a pre-K school, in order to fill that gap. New schools can also be district managed or managed by a partner organization. The new schools will provide a new academic program based on the Effective School Framework aligned model. They will use high quality instructional materials, and they will have to hire new leadership and staff. These new school buildings can actually be in existing facilities or in a new building. One quasi-experimental design study discusses the student outcomes related to creating small schools of choice. Bloom and Utterman examined the effects of opening new high schools known as small schools of choice. This research study is actually part 3 of a 3-part series with a third cohort of students being added to the study. There were over 12,000 students in 84 small high schools of choice. This study showed that small schools of choice in New York City continue to increase high school graduation rates for large numbers of disadvantaged students of color, even as graduation rates are rising at the schools in which the small schools were compared. In this third installment of the study, new evidence was emerging that the small schools of choice may increase graduation rates for special education students and English language learners. However, given the still limited sample size for these subgroups, the evidence was not definite and more student cohorts will have to be added. The qualitative data of this particular study showed that the principals and teachers at 25 of the small schools of choice with the strongest evidence of effectiveness strongly believed that the academic rigor and personal relationships with students contributed to the effectiveness of their schools. The next 2 quasi-experimental studies, summarized, discuss creating new and restructured schools as one of the reform models examined in the articles. The De La Torre et al. Article discussed 5 distinct reform models that were implemented in Chicago public schools. The schools had been identified as chronically low performing by the district. The 5 distinct reform models that were implemented were reconstitution of the schools, school closure and restarts. Some schools implemented the School Turnaround Specialist Program. Others implemented the Academy for Urban School Leadership, and some implemented the Chicago Public Schools Office of School Improvement model. Again, the population was 36 intervention campuses, and the majority of the schools were predominantly African American. The study was quasi-experimental, and after 2 to 4 years, elementary schools that implemented reforms showed higher math and reading achievement gains compared to non-reform schools. This table displays the 4 school policy changes that were required as a part of the reform models. Some schools were required to replace their staff. Some had leadership replacement requirements. Some were required to replace their governance, and others had change in their attendance rules. For school closures and restarts, where new schools were created, they were required to change all 4 policies. This article, the De La Torre et al. Article, talking about the 5 school improvement models, does give a good description of what each of these models entail, as well as the relationship to student outcomes. This article by Gill, Zimmer, Chrisman, and Blanc discusses schools taken over by the state and assigned to a reform model. The reform models included private management, school restructuring, or state takeover. The population that was included in this study was 45 low-performing schools in Philadelphia. The authors reported that over a 4-year period after the state takeover, 5th graders and 8th graders had significant gains in math and English proficiency, regardless of intervention type. District-managed restructured schools showed large achievements in mathematics in the first 3 years of implementation. Students in restructured schools with intensive professional development and district oversight performed better in math for 4 years and in reading for 1 year following the school's restructuring. Here's a few takeaways for the research discussed in this video. Creating small schools of choice had a positive relationship with increased graduation rates for New York high school students. School reforms that include creating new schools through restructuring can have positive correlations with student performance outcomes, as reported by De La Torre et al. 2013 and Gill, Zimmer, Chrisman, and Blanc 2007. More rigorous research is needed, specifically about the effects of opening brand new schools on student academic outcomes. Here are the references for all of the research articles discussed in this video. If you have any questions about the material discussed in this video, please contact me, Kathy Terry. Thank you.